Hello, everyone, and welcome to Best of SASE Week, SASE and Zero Trust in the Era of AI. Today's webinar is sponsored by Netskope and produced by Actual Tech Media, of whom I am a part. I am Keith Ward, and I am super excited to be your moderator for this special event. First, I need to cover a few housekeeping items with you. And the first one is that we want your questions, and you should drop them in the questions box in your webinar control panel. Now, that's also the place to let us know where you're logging in from today. We love knowing where you are, so tell us now. I'm in my office over the garage here in Maryland, and it is cold being right over the garage, you know. All right, so where are you from? Let us know. Now, that Q&A panel is also the place to let us know about any technical issues that you might be having now or later. First thing you want to do is a browser refresh, or maybe two. That'll fix most audio, video, slide advancement issues. So if something goes wrong, that's what you want to try first. If that doesn't work, let us know in that Q&A section, and we'll hop on and try to help you out. Next, we've got some great handouts in the handout section, and they are all free and available right now. Those handouts include 4 from Netskope, and they include their solution briefs, a zero trust use cases ebook, and some great SASE overviews. You'll also find a link to the ATM Event Center, which has our calendar of more upcoming events just like this one. See what you like. Sign up today. And finally, at the end of this webinar, we're going to be making one of you $250 richer, courtesy of an Amazon gift card. Now, you do have to be in attendance during the entire live event to qualify for that prize. The official terms and conditions of today's prize drawing can be found in the handouts section. Scroll to the bottom and you'll find the link with more details there. And with that, folks, let's get to today's fantastic content. Now, this is a bit different format today. It's a compilation from a series of webinars that Netskope recently held and provides a fantastic, awesome, in-depth interview of SASE and Zero Trust in the AI era. So you can see the presenters there that you're going to be meeting today. So I'm just going to get this sucker started right now.
Everything in the world needs to be connected to everything. That is a fait accompli. It's going to happen.
The last decade has brought enormous change.
We saw the emergence of SaaS applications, Docs, Sheets. Google came out and said everything is going to be in the cloud.
It was at that moment that I realized cloud was everywhere. End users brought it in, and networking security had changed forever. I realized we're going to build something that solves this problem.
We are going to focus on building a solution that would provide granular policy enforcement based on the context, which we have not seen anywhere else in the industry.
To be able to have different levels of configuration is a flexibility that only Netskope uniquely can provide. We basically decode the internet. We really looked at the perimeter of an organization as not the 4 walls of a building, but it's the user.
I need my security to work everywhere. I need it to follow me. I need it to be close to me because end user experience is critical. So we built UEdge.
In fact, we would give them better security than what they had when they were on-prem. It is much quicker to go through the Netskope network than through the regular internet.
And it's 10 to 15 milliseconds away from anybody in the world.
Scale is a necessity in the boardroom. One problem, one solution. That doesn't scale anymore.
Platforms give us scale across the organization.
You get consolidation and simplification of policy. Netskope has always been built as a platform to weather whatever storms are going to come.
The example was ChatGPT. Everybody was losing their minds.
The companies that had Netskope were ready from day one.
We didn't have to scramble. The underlying technology was designed to cover safely enabling these apps.
Tomorrow, when a quantum computer is out there and we're all worrying about the risk or any other evolution, Netskope, the platform will be
ready for anything.
Welcome, everyone, to another great SASE week. I'm Sanjay Beri, the founder and CEO of Netskope. I'm excited today to cover many topics, and we're going to whiz through first a very quick update on the company, and then dive into what is a top-of-mind topic, platformization, AI and its responsible usage, and much more. So let's go straight into it. Quick update on Netskope. When you look at the company, we were founded 12 years ago. When you look at our mission, it really was what is now called SASE, the napkin on which we are drawn. This notion that everybody would be interconnected, and not just everybody, but every device, every app would talk to each other. 8, 9 years in, it got a name, SASE, and that's what we're talking about. But as we've grown the company, we're about close to 3,000 people, over 3,500 customers, close to a third of the Fortune 100 across all verticals and all geos. A huge investment, as always, in innovation. Close to half our people are in R&D. We believe you innovate or you die, especially in the convergence of security and networking. For us, the focus on that innovation and the focus on really implementing and getting our customers moving along their journey, both in network modernization and zero trust, has really been the big focus for the past over decade. You've seen the Magic Quadrant, perhaps, the SSE Magic Quadrant, SSE plus SD-WAN equals SASE. But on the SSE side, you saw perhaps some of the latest results. Our team was very proud, happy, and very thankful for our customers and our partners and our advocates and our advisors for helping us on this journey to really make us the leader in SSE. If you're not familiar sort of with the quadrant or some of the next level of detail, take a look at it. Take a look at the critical insights, which is the next level of detailed rankings and understanding of the use cases within SSE and the analytics around how we performed. And we're very happy to have performed and had the highest ranking in many of those use cases. So let's get to SASE. Probably first, to level set everyone, should define what it is. So first, SASE is a piece of the network and security market. I'm not a big believer, as I'll talk to you later, about one platform for all of security and networking. I believe that people, over time, will have a few. And SASE is one of those core ones. It's a convergence of many previously disparate parts. On the right side, you have SSE. You could view that as the security portion of SASE, along with some of the infrastructure portion. A lot of what you may have known as separate markets, secure web gateway, CASB, VPNs, moving to zero trust network access, cloud firewalls, browser isolation, digital experience. I mean, a lot of buzzword bingo there. But the reality is that all of those were converging. And one of the unique things about how we thought about it was that, wait, these disparate systems, they actually have common components. And we'll walk you through that. One proxy, one network, one method of steering, one set of services that are microservices, DLP and threat. And so when you look at the right, even though it has many different category names, under the hood for Netskope, how we built it organically is that ultimately 90% is the same for each module. And that's the way it should be, to get operational leverage, to get R&D leverage, and beyond. On the left is the infrastructure ops side, right? Just like on the right, we think from a security perspective. On the left, it's really about optimizing the end user experience, accelerating it, making sure you have full visibility as you move to the cloud, as you work remote and beyond. Combined, both become SASE. And that's really the focus of Netskope, is how do we deliver this platform that is modular, that is truly integrated, that could deliver SASE, but that's open. And that's a critical point, because maybe you don't use every component from one vendor. Maybe you do. But we all have a responsibility to be open and integrate with each other. And that's another core component of how I think about our SASE vision, delivering SASE to integrate with everything else and integrate in of itself with other solutions you may have within this space. So that brings me to the first macro category of things I want to talk about, and that's the call for convergence. You've heard it. Maybe you saw it on LinkedIn. Maybe you saw it in a conference. But there is this big call for convergence in the world. And the reality is that, for good reason, on the left, you look at the security and network market. I mean, thousands of vendors, right? And then you look on the right, where perhaps some people are espousing, well, you just need one. Pragmatically and realistically, and thinking about resilience and efficacy, you don't want to be on the left, far left, and you don't want to be on the far right. You don't want to have 100 vendors. It's not operationally possible in many cases. You don't want to have one, right? Having one and putting all your eggs in one basket, what kind of risk reduction does that happen? And perhaps you get the best of nothing as a result. And so the reality and the pragmatic reality is that platformization when you think about that concept, which is spreading through the world, you have to realize it's not the same as simplicity, right? Platformization doesn't equal simplicity. And let me explain why. On the left is how people talk about platformization. And maybe that's not how they talk about it, but that's actually when you dive in and you say one platform for all of security networking, what you're actually focused on, and the people talking about that are focused on, is often vendor lock-in. They're focused on things that have been built inorganically and put together and integrated on a price list. So it looks like, oh, I can buy this one platform, but wait, why does it have 4 GUIs? Right? Why does it have 4 backend data models? Why are the policies all separate? Right? Limited integration. Why is it not open? Why doesn't it integrate with these other systems, my endpoint, my identity, my SIM, SOAR? So platformization, and the way it's often talked about in industry, is actually the opposite of what you want. You want the right simplicity. And simplicity means, as you can see here, wow, I'm focused on the customer. I'm focused on the notion that, you know what, they want to simplify how they operate. They don't want to look at something and say, wait a minute, why do I have to set policies 4 places? Why is my data protection different in every one of those locations? Why can't I integrate this seamlessly with my other network security solutions? I want open APIs, right? And so really when you think about simplicity, that's the key. You focus on how do I make this simpler for the customer and the end user? And that's where, when you think about it more in that vein, you end up with this call for convergence, pragmatically being more having a few security and networking platforms. Not on the left, erring more on the side of the right? You don't have one, but I'd argue you have a few, right? And you could have one for SSE or one for SASE. You could have one for EDR, one for identity, one for SIM SOAR, one for GRC. So you have a few. And these things, they need to integrate well together. And here's a quick diagram of how perhaps they could integrate. Take these 4 different platforms. Your EDR is dynamically sharing IOC information with your SASE and vice versa. So they're enhancing each other's threat capabilities. One is on the endpoint, one's in line. They have the ability to govern traffic in a different way. Identity. Well, your identity provider and your SSE are sharing its view of the risk of the user or device. They both have a unique perspective. Could they be correlated? So you arrive at one user dynamic risk score. All of these are examples of what I mean by true integration. And one of our focuses has been to really drive that open API integration among vendors. We deploy people in standards forums. We developed the Cloud Exchange, where you can plug in your different solutions so they start sharing dynamically information for the betterment of your entire security and network posture. So that's what I mean when we think about convergence. The pragmatic, not middle ground, leaning more towards having a few platforms that are open, integrated, and truly delivering convergence from one network, one client, one GUI, and beyond. So you may have seen some of the integrations that Netskope drives. They're categorized. I've categorized them here roughly into what I described, but you'll see a lot of logos. There's obviously many more than just are on this slide, but it shows you what I mean by having an ecosystem, right? Where you get to choose as an enterprise, as a company, as an organization, what you'd want to use in each area, and you ask that your vendors and your partners, which ideally is how we want to think about ourselves, they take care of that integration and sharing of information amongst the different solutions. So that's the first. We talked a little about convergence, right? And how it's really pragmatically a few platforms that truly are integrated, not on a price list, but in reality by having convergence. And we talked about the openness. Another top topic out there that perhaps doesn't get talked about a lot is what's happened in the internet in the past decade. And that's where this topic of language matters is really a very important area. Ultimately, when you're an end user or you're a device or you're an app, you're communicating to something, right? Everything communicates to everything nowadays. A branch talks to a branch, a user talks to an app talks to an app, a device talks to the internet. Ultimately, they speak a language. And the first thing you have to know about that language that they're speaking is that more often than not, it's encrypted. 86.2% of web traffic is now encrypted. I'll go to 90 soon, and then into the mid-90s, right? The reality is the first thing, and it sounds kind of basic, but I still run into organizations who don't do it, is you must look within this encrypted traffic, right? If close to 90% of the internet is encrypted, how could you protect yourself, understand when there's anomalous behavior, when there's data loss, when there's malware coming to your system, unless you can actually see that encrypted traffic? It could come from a corporate device, could come from an unmanaged system, could come from a branch where you can't put anything on an endpoint. A lot of different places it can come from. And the reality is, the first thing is, when you look at encrypted traffic, you have to do it responsibly. You have to do it in a very performant way, but you have to do it in a responsible way. And what I mean by that is you have to really think about your PKI. You have to think about, well, wait, how are keys managed? Are they stored in a FIPS2 level 3 HSM? Can I use my own keys? Could I use my own HSM on premise, right? Are these keys rotated quickly? Are they ephemeral, right? Are my session keys quick and out? How do I think about that? And so at Netskope, along with some of the biggest crypto experts out there in the world, some of the folks who, like, for example, Dr. Dan Bonnet, who leads our Encryption Cryptography Council, one of the foremost authorities on encryption, we spent a lot of time on our PKI framework and how it drives privacy, how it drives resilience and performance, and ultimately a secure PKI environment. That allows you to do what you must do, which is look within that SSL encrypted traffic so that you can ultimately reduce your risk as a company. So that's one. That's what I mean by language, the first more basic thing. The more, I wouldn't say advanced thing, is that the language of the internet itself is different. It used to be that when you're accessing the web, you talked about HTTP and HTTPS. And that was, wow, you're interpreting HTTP and HTTPS, not just looking at TCP, IP, and ports, right, and beyond. But the reality is that today, the internet is not decipherable by just looking at HTTP or HTTPS. The internet's based off a different language. When it moved to cloud, when cloud became prevalent, the language of cloud ultimately became APIs and JSON. And when you look at this transformation, ultimately in security, you kind of want to know the who, the what, the when, the where, and the why. And unless you understand the new language of the internet, you're not going to get this. And so when you see this transformation, you see this sudden change that seems sudden when you look at it. It's sudden because it's really only in the past decade. In the grand scheme of things, it's not a long time. And you see the notion that, wait a minute, traditional HTTP, HTTPS websites are the minority now. The majority are things that look like cloud apps, that speak this new language. Whether it's SaaS or public cloud, or many modern websites are really dumb SaaS apps, right? Ultimately, what you very quickly realize is that this old world of HTTP, HTTPS, put-gets has moved to this world of APIs and JSON. And what does that mean? It means when you talk, when you're making a connection on the internet, on the wire is a bunch of API JSON calls, not things that you could ever understand if you just understood traditionally what a web proxy understood. And security is ultimately about understanding what people are doing. And so I want to dive into this topic because it may seem a little foreign, like, what are you talking about? APIs and JSON, the new language of the internet, that's how apps speak, that's how websites speak. Okay, well, why is it so important that I need to understand it? And so, one, it isn't just cloud, it's AI. AI speaks the same language. It's all APIs and JSON. You look at ChatGPT or Bard or Gemini or beyond on the wire, it's a bunch of JSON API calls. And so this concept that we call our zero trust engine, when you look at it, what is it trying to do? It's trying to let you set business policies. For example, you don't want to block Office 365 or allow it. You don't want to block ChatGPT or allow it. You want something much more granular. You want to be able to say, well, wait, I'd like to let people use ChatGPT, but only if it's the corporate instance and only if they don't query with source code or something sensitive. But if it's a corporate instance and they're querying with non-sensitive data, I'm okay. Well, yeah, I'd like people to use Microsoft OneDrive, but wait, I don't want them sharing sensitive data externally on it. I don't want them using a non-corporate instance and uploading sensitive data. These are the nuanced policies you want versus, hey, block it or allow it. And so ultimately, when you look at understanding the language of the internet, unless you understand it, you can't enforce these policies. You're stuck with block this URL or allow it. And that's what I mean really when I talk about understanding the new language of the internet. Netskope has one of its first patents was interpreting internet traffic at the API JSON level. By doing that, it lets us understand, well, wait, what app is this? Well, is it a corporate or non-corporate app? Are they sharing externally? Are they signing, editing? What activity are they performing? Well, what data are they transacting with? Are they chatting with sensitive data on a Zoom chat? What are they doing? And so because we dive into every real-time transaction and understand the APIs and the JSON, we're able to quickly give you this view of, well, what instance is it? What activity are they performing? What data, structured, unstructured, are they communicating with? And let you enforce the business policies you want. And those business policies ultimately are what I described. Wow, you can use ChatGPT, but only if it's a corporate instance and you can't query with sensitive data. You can use a SaaS app, but if it's a non-corporate version and you try to share externally, I'm going to stop that. All the things that you want to do so that you don't just say no. And ultimately, when you put this zero trust engine together, what you have is you have security policies that come out of it, where perhaps when somebody does something you don't want, you real-time coach the end user to say, hey, actually, you can't be putting that sensitive data in that non-corporate instance of this app. Or you can't be blogging on that website with that type of sentiment. But also you can have network policies, right? Out of this could come network policies that say, well, in my branch or retail environment, I want to prioritize traffic that is going to applications that are not high risk, that are not apps where there's a risk if people try to store sensitive data there. I want to prioritize my corporate applications and the corporate instances of those applications and the corporate behaviors, right? So really, when you think about our zero trust engine, real-time, dynamic, next level of proxy, it feeds your security policies and your network policies. And cohesively, you can ultimately then get a very coordinated and savvy policy that you can implement, a business policy. So that's really what we mean by the new language of the internet. It's moved on, and you need to have your platforms understand that new language so you can enforce the granular business policies you want. Another way to think about this is here. It's kind of an example of what I described, where you can see, you can have a notion of, well, if this is a corporate device and it's not high risk, for example, the posture, it has the right software installed. Okay, for those type of devices, I'm going to allow them to communicate to this instance of this app and transact with sensitive data. And so really this engine is dynamically assessing the risk of your device, the user, the location, and the risk of this transaction by understanding behaviors, instances, and data, and the risk of the destination by dynamically profiling the risk of the website or the app. And by stitching these risks together, the risk of the thing originating something, the risk of the transaction and the data and the behavior, and the risk of the destination, you can truly implement a zero trust policy, right? That isn't, well, stop or allow, but dynamic and more granular. So that's really what we mean by having a true zero trust engine. Starts with this concept of a layer of proxy, starts with the concept of dynamic risk assessment of your user and your device and your location and where it's going. So this is how we think about the history of time. You have firewalls, IPSs, UTMs, next-gen firewalls, web proxies. They capped out at really speaking the old language of the internet, right? HTTP, HTTPS, puts and gets. And really, one of the innovations that Netskope brought to market was really the first proxy that could understand the new language of the internet. And that was actually our first patent. And that's really, when you look at this stack, what I mean is how do I cover everything from all the way down to protocols and HTTP all the way up to what you talk about as APIs and JSON. So I'm going to move on to the next topic. And this topic talks about another type of convergence that is happening out there in the world. And so you all work with your peers. You may be head of infrastructure or ops. You may be in the networking group. You could be in the security group. You could be a CIO. But ultimately, in many companies, the lineage of the infrastructure ops side and the security side is very different backgrounds, very different focus areas, very different what they owned before. But in this new world where you're remote, you're accessing SaaS, on-prem apps, cloud, you're working from anywhere, from any device, you have partners, contractors, you're doing M&A, security and networking are converging. And you saw that in the beginning in how we talked about SASE, right? Two sides to the same coin, really, when you think about networking, infrastructure, and what you're trying to achieve from a security perspective. And so the importance of collaborating and bringing these two teams together could never have been more important than it is now. And moving along a true SASE journey, it requires that. And so I often say that Netskope has two sides to its platform, right? Two sides to the same coin. One is security focused. One is focused on this concept of how do I move to the zero trust architecture and framework and least privilege and protect my data. And the other, which is often the infrastructure ops side, is focused on, well, how do I optimize, accelerate, and deliver a great end user experience? And they're two sides to the same coin, right? They're converged, but they're two different lenses. And on one side, you will very much care about, I want access from anywhere. What's their latency? What's their RTT times? How fast are my users getting access? How resilient is it? How do I make sure I have an SLA that is, better than I've ever had before? On the other side, while you care about those, you also care about the efficacy of your security policies, data exfil, compromised users, compromised insiders, right? Compromised credentials. But ultimately, SASE and SASE brings those two together, and that's what at Netskope we pride ourselves on, is bringing those two groups together so that in one platform, they get what they wanted. And so I'll kind of abstract this. The nirvana for many folks in security is that they could look at their entire base, could be users, devices, locations, apps, and they could dynamically at any point in time know, well, what's the trust of that user? And what's their trust score? If it was out of 100, what's the trust of this user? 17 in this case being, well, not very trustworthy, right? Perhaps a compromised user, someone who's malicious. They would want the same, not just for their users all across the world, a good user. They'd want the same as well for their offices, their branches, their locations, and they would want the same for their devices. That would be their nirvana. If I had a map and I could just look and I could see, and my policies could be dynamic based off of their risk. If they're a high-risk user, automatically what they can do is downgrade it. They're not allowed to take data out of our repositories, not allowed to share them, they're not allowed to ever copy them onto their corporate or home laptop. Policies could change, right? In a similar framework, if a user is of high trust, then perhaps the policies and the enablement that you wanted originally, you would let them do that. So this is often a CISO's view, right? And that's available now at Netskope. You have a view dynamically of risk of users, locations, apps. Policies can be used based off a dynamic risk. At any one point, you can see the trust of anything. You can see why. What changed that trust? Was it their behavior? Was it abnormal behavior? Was it a posture of their endpoint? What? That's very clear. Now, when I work with infrastructure ops folks, they ask me, well, Sanjay, I want the equivalent. But my equivalent is that same map, that same dynamic view, I want it for end user experience. I want to know what the experience of that user or that location or that device or that app is. And that's really what Netskope has delivered with its proactive digital experience management, is the ability for you to dynamically see what is that user experience. And that user experience and why it's good or bad, how can Netskope auto-remediate it? Now, in many cases you can, in some cases you can't. For example, maybe the experience is bad because their home Wi-Fi has a problem. Well, we should be able to tell you that. Their home Wi-Fi has a problem, right? They're using 99% of their memory on their CPU. Could be the app has an issue, the app they're going to. By being able to monitor the app now, synthetically and in real time, we can tell you if this app is having degradation. It could be a carrier in between you and the app. Well, there, Netskope should be able to help, for example, reroute you through New Edge, and its fast peering, be able to reroute you around carrier issues, something that we recently rolled out, the ability to automatically do that. This is what, in many cases, infrastructure ops folks care about is what's the user experience and how are you going to help me make it better, and how are you going to help me auto-remediate it when it's bad? And that's really what UEdge and our focus on it. It is the world's largest, most connected cloud network from a security and network perspective, right? 10, 20 milliseconds away from anybody in the world. Every location, every region contains everything we do. You don't have to worry about being backhauled somewhere to get private access or to get data. It's everywhere. Connected, so you don't go over the internet when you come to us and you go to a SaaS provider, a public cloud, or even on-prem where you can direct connect and peer with us. It brings the best of cloud networking and on-prem networking together to deliver that great end user experience while making your security ubiquitous and close to the end user. That's really the purpose, of Netskope.
I am Krishna Narayanaswamy, co-founder and CTO of Netskope, and in today's session, I'm going to be talking about the innovation that we have been doing to our platform and how we plan to progress it in the future. So before we get there, let me start talking about the journey that we started 12 years ago. It was October of 2012 when we founded Netskope, and the premise at that time were twofold. One was the proliferation of SaaS applications in enterprises. We started seeing more and more organizations adopting SaaS applications. In fact, if you go back to 2012, Office 365 was not even around, and it was mostly around Salesforce, Google Workspace, Atlassian, and so on, right? But nevertheless, the momentum has started shifting in terms of organizations not investing in applications homegrown and moving more to SaaS applications, right? And we felt that existing security companies at that time, whether it's Symantec, McAfee, Cisco, Juniper, Palo Alto, name them all, right? None of them were paying attention to this migration to SaaS. So that was one primary reason that we felt there was a need for a newer solution in the market. The second one was also remote work. We never predicted something like a COVID situation, but even back then, we started seeing global workforce where your job does not end at 5 or 6 p.m. when you go home. You have dinner and you got to open up your laptop and collaborate with your colleagues across the globe. And when you do that, it was always a very highly latency prone path that you needed to take because of getting security, right? When you work from home back in 2012, you had to open a VPN tunnel so that your traffic could go through your data centers where the security was applied. But if you're going to SaaS, and you're working from home, why do you have to open the VPN tunnel? That's what got us thinking as to why we should do something different, and the timing was right. So that was the napkin picture that we drew, that, hey, when people are working remote or wherever they're working from, and they're accessing services, whether it's SaaS, on-prem, you should be able to provide them the most optimal path and deliver the security that is relevant to the changes that were happening. So with that in mind, what happened was we were on a journey. We started at that time, maybe a few months after we started, Gartner coined the term CASB, Cloud Access Security Broker. We fell right in spot in terms of our solution. We fit the requirements that Gartner had laid out for CASB. But over the years, we also felt that there was a unification of proxies in enterprises, right? So if you go back at that time, proxies were next-gen firewalls and proxies were mostly doing secure web gateway functionality like URL filtering and acceptable usage policies and threat detection, right? Now, you have this monster of SaaS coming up, and you also have people going to internet sites. Why do you need to have two separate proxies, right? So we decided to unify the proxy, and we called it the next-gen secure web gateway. And so now organizations could have one proxy, and this was delivered in the cloud because this was the most optimal place for given the trends that were happening in terms of SaaS adoption. The second thing also that was built into the platform was, by default, we decrypted all SSL and TLS traffic. 100% of SaaS traffic is all SSL and TLS, and if you do not decrypt it, you're not going to get the visibility you need to apply zero trust policies. So that was the next step, big step in our journey. I would say the next major step in our journey was also to incorporate ZTNA, Zero Trust Network Access. Organizations, even though they were adopting SaaS, still had a good bit of applications running on-prem or migrating to public cloud like AWS, GCP, and Azure. And there was a need to modernize VPN, right? VPN, which was mostly around connecting devices to networks, were creating problems in terms of lateral movements of threats. And you needed the newer paradigm, which is connect users to applications, right? So we expanded the platform by adding the ZTNA component. And right around this time, we also made another big investment, which I'm going to be emphasizing throughout today's session, which is our investment into the network that we built. So we built a purpose-built cloud edge network called New Edge, and that was another major step in our platform. And I would say the last one that we have undertaken in the last couple of years is the addition of SD-WAN technology. We call it borderless WAN, which makes us an entire platform that delivers SASE from a single vendor, right? So if you go back to 2019, Gartner came out with this concept of SASE and SSE, Secure Access Service Edge and Security Service Edge. And up until 2 years ago, we were mostly a SSE solution. With the addition of our borderless WAN, SD-WAN solution, we now become a single vendor SASE solution, and we are covered as leaders in both the magic quadrants that Gartner covers for SSE as well as SASE. So that is our journey. And as you can see, it has happened over the span of 12 years. And we plan to continue to build on this over time. And today, I'm going to share with you some other important aspects of that innovation that we are planning to come out with. Now, while we went on this journey, we have also invested a lot in R&D. We could not have come here if we have not invested in R&D. We are proud to say that over 50% of Netskope works in R&D. That's over 1,000 plus employees, right? And we also caught the wave of AI ML not 2 years ago, but more than 5 years ago. We felt that AI and ML had to be an integral part of our platform. And so we started building a data science team. And today we have over 100 plus data scientists and engineers working towards building AI ML models that is incorporated into our platform. And along the journey, our patent base has also grown to over 200, and we will continue to be innovating as a company. Now, in terms of AI and ML specifically, we have over 160 models that have been deployed. And specifically for AI ML, we have over 30 AI ML related patents that have been awarded to Netskope. So let me just touch a little bit more on exactly the areas we touch on in terms of AI ML capabilities, right? So data loss is a very big part of our platform, and we've done a lot of work in terms of AI ML, behavior analysis, threat detection. These are also other areas of the platform where we have extracted the goodness of AI ML to give better outcomes for our customers. And you see the other, I don't intend to go through each one of them, but needless to say that we have big investments, and we will continue to invest in our data science team and come out with more innovations on AI and ML that will get you better outcomes for our customers. Now, a big part of the success of Netskope and the differentiation of Netskope is the context that we derive when we apply policies and when we inspect traffic, right? So this is a good showcase of what we have done in terms of innovation, in terms of identifying context, right? When you look at typical security vendors, everyone does identity, device, and to some extent app, right? They will allow you to allow or block an app, or allow or block a URL or a category of URLs, right? But once you start adopting SaaS applications, it becomes even more important to know more than those three things, right? All apps are not created equal. To give you an example, today we have over 80,000 SaaS applications, and we have a cloud risk rating of those applications. We call it the Cloud Confidence Index. And in cloud storage alone, there are close to 150 applications. All of them are not created equal. Some of them are trusted, like your OneDrives, Google Drives, Box, and so on. And then you have very untrusted cloud storage services like Zippy Share and so on as well, right? And so it becomes very important not only to know what app your users are going to, but also what is the risk rating of the app. Similarly, SaaS apps are all multi-tenant by nature. Just because you're using OneDrive, which is very secure, by the way, it does not mean that a third party, which could be a threat actor, could also acquire a O365 tenant, and at the URL level, they all look the same. And by the way, this applies to Google Drive, this applies to Box. I'm not picking out O365 specifically, but overall, SaaS in general is multi-tenant in nature. And so it becomes very important when your users are using these SaaS applications, you're able to identify that they are indeed going to your instance, in which case they can they can have free access, uploads, downloads, share, and so on. But if they are collaborating with another instance, it may be a partner, in which case it may be okay to share files. But if it's an unknown instance, for example, or a personal instance, you need to be careful in what you allow your customers, your users to do, right? So that is where instance becomes a very key part of the zero trust policy framework, and not just blindly trusting SaaS applications because they are from trusted vendors. And this is something that we are very passionate about, because we see a lot of organizations still bypassing some of these traditional applications, SaaS applications like O365, Google, and so on. But you have to be aware that by doing so, you're opening up your threat surface, because threat actors are also using those services. Now, integrated into the platform is also behavior trust. We'll be touching upon that a little bit later in today's presentation. And data is also a big part of it, like what type of data is being uploaded, downloaded, and taking action on that. Now, once you apply all these criteria, what do you do? In the case of security service edge and security policies, it's not only allow a block that is important. Coaching is a very integral part of our platform. We have seen time and again and got very good feedback from our customers that by coaching users in real time, you're able to mold good digital citizens, right? We often ask our users to go and take security awareness training, and they tend to pass the test, come back, and they still make the same mistakes, right? Whereas here you have a platform where, as they are about to make a mistake, you nudge them, right? This power of nudging has been proven in many of our customers have given very good feedback. And so that is part of the zero trust policy framework that we have built, the active coaching. Now, when it comes to SD-WAN policies, network policies, it's not only allow a block, but do you prioritize? Like maybe you're sitting remote and you're on a Teams call and you have a lossy network, then you may want to prioritize the voice and video so that you have a more better user experience of the multimedia session, as opposed to getting choppy video or broken up voice streams, right? Which is very common. All of us have been through that. So this is the overall zero trust engine framework, which is a very differentiated part of the Netskope platform. And you will see us emphasizing on this again and again through the SASE week. But please pay attention to this, because this is something that will be a key part of your security journey as you modernize your security architecture. I want to double click on the context, right? The importance of context, especially when it comes to data. So let's rewind 12 years ago when we started Netskope. DLP was all along in the market, right? We had the likes of the Symantec, McAfee's, ForcePoint, and so on, providing enterprise-grade DLP solutions. But what happened was it was mostly, or I would say almost 90+% focused on content inspection, cracking open the file, applying regular expressions, keywords, and so on, right? And there's very limited context. If you had a proxy, like a blue coat proxy or even a cloud proxy, what they did was they ICAP'd. ICAP was the protocol they used to send the data traffic to your Symantecs and McAfee's and ForcePoints, where all they passed along was the user, right? This is Krishna trying to upload a file. And that was the only context that the DLP systems had to detect sensitive data. Now, what that led to is very poor efficacy in terms of detection, and also high false positives. This is when we stepped in as Netskope. We were the very first ones in the industry to marry rich context to content inspection, because we did it all in one platform. It was not one of proxy being separate from DLP. We merged the two together, and by doing so, we could use the rich context that I shared with you in the previous slide with our content inspection, and the outcome is way better, right? You get higher fidelity of detection, and you also get low false positives. And we have seen again in customer scenarios where they're able to get much better detection capabilities using the Netskope platform. Now, I just want to give you a history of the Netskope data protection over the years. So when we started, I call that Gen 1.0, where you had the legacy vendors providing data loss prevention solutions. Now, we stepped in around 2014, 2015 with our Gen 2.0, and our focus initially was web and cloud, SaaS and IaaS. And in terms of the context, we not only had the environmental context like the user, device, and location, but we augmented that with the cloud context, right? What is the instance of the application somebody's going? What is the risk rating of the application, right? What activity are they performing? And based on that, you could get much better outcomes. And in terms of the content inspection, we matched whatever features that enterprise DLP had so that your transition or migration from an existing enterprise DLP was easy to the Netskope Cloud DLP. And we added things in addition to like optical character recognition, as well as integrating with classification systems. Like at that time, it was Microsoft Information Protection. The name is changed now to Purview, and then Titus, Bolt-on James, and so on, right? Now, where we are today, 2024, is the Gen 3.0 of Netskope DLP, where we have added more channels, email as well as endpoint, and including private apps as well. And on the platform side, we have gone beyond the app context. We have multiple aspects of the Netskope platform, you know, the SSPM, the CSPM, the user risk rating, and so on. All that context is also now put into the DLP policy framework. So now, overall, with that kind of context, you get much better outcomes. And where we are headed to, and I'm going to share more later on in the presentation today, is on the external context. So we do know that you have other vendors who may be providing some context that is useful from a data protection perspective. And so we are pulling in that context as well. This could be your EDR, SSO, or secure email gateway, and so on, right? And from a inspection capabilities, we have augmented whatever we had in Gen 2.0 with AI ML models for automatically detecting PII, PCI, and so on, like GDPR type of data. And we introduced last year, very excited, we introduced last year the concept of train your own classifier, TYOC, where you as our customers can build your own machine learning models and deploy them in the Netskope cloud. So needless to say, we have had a meteoric journey in terms of capabilities on our data protection, and we will continue to do so in the coming years. So now let's shift gears to the network side, right? The Netskope New Edge that I mentioned earlier. So initially, Netskope dabbled in terms of running our services in the public cloud, and we realized that for a proxy service like what we have, the public cloud is not the best option to run the service. With that in mind, we made a big investment and built our own private edge cloud. We call it New Edge. It's over 75 regions today, and every one of the orange dots you see on the map here runs every one of our services. We don't believe in backhauling. So every service you saw on the platform slide that I showed runs in every one of these dots, which gives the user experience a much better user experience, right? Because the latency is very well controlled. And on the back end, we peer with all the major providers like Google, Amazon, Microsoft, Box, Dropbox, everybody, right? All the content providers and SaaS providers we peer with. So this gives the end-to-end, this gives you a very good control of end-to-end latency, which in turn means much better user experience, right? And we back it up with SLAs. So if you go to the Netskope's website, you can look at our SLAs for uptime as well as decryption time. As I said, our proxies decrypt traffic 100% of the time, unless you don't want us to do so for certain websites like financial websites and healthcare websites. But otherwise, whenever we decrypt, we give you SLAs on the latency that we will incur in terms of inspection. Now, the reason this is important is the platform. This is a Netskope One platform that we have built, runs on that infrastructure. We have much better control because we own that infrastructure, right? So let me quickly walk you through this Netskope One platform. On the bottom side is where the users are. Users either can be working remote, in which case there's a client that runs on the endpoint that steers traffic to our cloud. If the users are working in an office, then we have options of a gateway. I talked to you about the SD-WAN gateway that we have, but we also interoperate with all the major SD-WAN providers in the market, where we can nail up GRE or IPsec tunnels to our cloud, to our New Edge cloud. the action happens in the zero trust engine, and all the security services are delivered in the new edge POPs, right? And as I mentioned before, at the point of ingress, we apply all the security services and the zero trust policies. Now, once the policy enforcement is done, if the traffic is allowed to pass through, then if it's going to external websites, it goes to wherever it needs to go. And that is where our peering helps, where we are peered with all the major providers. And so we get the highway route to your destination. And if you're going to your private apps, in that case, obviously it is your private apps are running in private IP space, so you need some component, we call it the one app gateway or a publisher, that runs in your infrastructure, in your data centers, or in your VPCs in your public cloud, that publishes or makes a connection to our cloud. And that's how we provide a path for the users accessing your private applications. Now, all of this is a single platform. It's one console, like one zero trust engine, one client, one network, and one gateway. You will never see Netskope having multiple footprints on the same location, right? Whether it's endpoint, network, or in your data center. And we are very particular about that because we want you to get that platform experience. We do know that many security vendors, you need to pop between different admin screens depending on which part of the solution you're working with, but that's not the intention of Netskope. We will always stick to this mantra of having a unified platform and a unified experience for yourselves. Now, I should also say at this point, we do integrate with ecosystem solutions. We have the concept of a cloud exchange, which I will be covering a little later in my presentation, where if you have EDR solutions, SSO solutions, secure email gateway solutions, or even UEBA solutions, we are able to integrate with all these different solutions so that you get better outcomes on the investments that you have made in your security environment, right? So this is the platform. So now let's move on. I want to now switch gears. That was the setup. And now I want to start talking about the innovations that we are coming out with, and which is the primary focus of this presentation. So let's start with the very first one, right? Now, it is a well-known fact to all like security and network admins that with remote work, there are a lot of challenges, especially if you're going down the path of the legacy way of opening VPN tunnels and so on. When users have difficulty accessing applications, debugging those things, it becomes very difficult because you have very limited visibility and control as to where the traffic is going and to debug it, right? So with that in mind, we have been hearing from customers, and we have come out with a service that I want to introduce today called Proactive Digital Experience Management. Now, what is that? So before we get to that, let's talk about why do we need that, right? So as you move to a SASE platform like the one I've talked about today, the Netskope One platform, you start losing visibility because the traffic going to the SASE platform is not coming through your infrastructure. So what we heard from a Gartner survey is that 90% of INO teams are facing this difficulty, and they're looking to adopt digital experience management solutions to take away those challenges and to help them address that. Now, also, today what happens is in order to solve this problem, there's a potpourri of solutions. You may have things like Thousand Eyes or Catchpoint and other performance and network monitoring tools that will give you tidbits of insights to go and figure out where the problem is, right? And what we also hear loud and clear from customers is majority of them, in this case like over 90%, right, want to consolidate these tools. And that is where Netskope's proactive DEM comes in. Our goal is to consolidate these tools so that you have one tool running on one platform to solve these challenges that you're facing today as you move to a SASE platform. So what is PDEM, in short, Proactive DEM? Proactive DEM enterprise is about giving you visibility, right? So let's start with sites first and then users next, right? If you have sites that you're connecting to the SASE platform, there's an agent, we call it the enterprise station, that runs on your data centers or your branch locations, and that is constantly monitoring the traffic going to the SASE platform that's in Netskope, which is our new edge network, as well as beyond that and where it's going to the destination, right? So all along these points, we are gathering telemetry information. Similarly, for users working remote, we have the Netskope client that runs on the endpoint. That Netskope client is now equipped with the capability to gather telemetry information. And this telemetry information is not only about network traffic, but also what is the Wi-Fi signal strength, what is the CPU, what is the CPU running at? Are there too many applications running that is hindering performance, right? So that you get a holistic view. So the type of telemetry that we gather are like, as the users are using apps, we are gathering the latencies, the packet drops, and so on, that type of telemetry information. Inside the Netskope cloud, because again, we own our cloud, so we have much better control in terms of identifying latency bottlenecks inside our infrastructure. So we provide that telemetry information. And similarly, the north side from our infrastructure to the cloud app or to the website, we are also gathering telemetry information. We are putting all of this together, right? Together, we also have synthetic probes. So we are looking at real user traffic as well as synthetic probes, putting all of that together to give you the insights in terms of where your problems are. So now you can readily address these problems. And what we're going to do is, at this point, we want to show you a demo of how this works so that you get a better appreciation of that.
Netskope Proactive DEM Enterprise seamlessly integrates real user monitoring with synthetic transaction monitoring to deliver comprehensive visibility across endpoints, customer networks, and the entire Netskope SASE platform. Spotlight contributing factors to poor user experience, starting with a global view of all users and zooming into a hop-by-hop view from the user's device accessing the application destination and all hops in between. The user's device is often a contributing factor to poor user experience. Netskope Proactive DEM monitors a variety of device characteristics, such as memory utilization and Wi-Fi signal strength. Proactive DEM Enterprise introduces a powerful site-centric view that, when combined with user monitoring, enables you to focus in on the source of the user experience issue, whether it's an issue affecting all users at a particular site, the connection to the Netskope New Edge POP, or maybe an issue with the ISP.
Now let's touch upon the New Edge network. You saw the slide with the picture of the globe and where we are located. So over 75 plus regions, and we continue to invest. So we are listening to you, our customers. So as and when you find that you have significant presence in a geographical region, we'd love to hear that so that we can add that to our plans in terms of adding data centers. Now, we also introduced the concept of localization zones. So if you have users in locations where we do not see that orange dot, and they are in a country where we do not have a data center and they have to go to a different country for processing, we have the concept of localization zones where we can ensure those users get content in their local language as well as content that's relevant to their locality, right? When they're searching for things like restaurants and so on, they're not getting results from where the data center is, but more so from where they are located. Now, another interesting thing which is very relevant that we added in the past year is the resiliency and the uptime of our services, right? So our clients, especially for users working remote, are constantly calling back to our home base to figure out what are the closest data centers that are to the user. And we pick the one that has the lowest latency or one that is the most optimal, I should say. And if at any time we detect there's an issue, we automatically route the user transparently. The user does not know. Again, going back to the user experience, this has shown, and we've got very good feedback from our customers who have enabled this, that the users are unaware when there are issues and they're automatically routed to the next best data center that can address their traffic, right? So that's something that together with our, we call it the GSLB, the Global Service Load Balancing, as well as the route control, have added a lot of robustness to our service and in turn, better user experience. And then the last thing that we did on the New Edge side in terms of additions is we are seeing more and more regions in the world that are requiring that data we store at rest, which we call the management plane, is stored in country. So wherever such requirements are there, we have been adding management planes so that users' data reside in country and does not cross country borders. So that is another area where we have been investing in, and we'll continue to invest. And again, we're able to do so because we have control of our infrastructure, right? There are regions where we have our management planes where some of the public service providers, public cloud providers do not have presence as well. So that's something that that we have control over, and we will continue to leverage. On the security innovation side, I want to talk about two things that that we have added. One is on the traffic visibility side, and the other one is on the threat detection side. So let's dive right into it, right? On the traffic visibility side, I'm very excited to share with you this Cloud Tap functionality that we have just introduced. So what does it solve? What is the problem? Why do you need a Cloud Tap, right? Normally, when you had traffic always going through your infrastructure, you had the ability to do packet captures, right? Sniffer ports or span ports, right? And then you had a variety of tools to diagnose problems. This could be like threat hunting, or could be diagnosing connectivity issues and so on, right? Now, all of a sudden, your users are going to the SASE cloud. Now, how do you recreate that, right? Now, you want the security and network operators, we have heard them loud and clear, need access to those packet captures in order to get their jobs done. And that is where the Cloud Tap comes in. So Cloud Tap was built to restore that functionality that you lost when you went to the cloud. Now, how does it work? So when traffic hits the Netskope New Edge cloud data center, right, whether it's coming from a remote user working from their home or a coffee shop, or from one of your locations, branch locations, data centers, however the traffic comes in, at the ingress point, what we are doing is we are tapping the encrypted traffic together with the session key that is needed to decrypt it in our proxy, and storing that in one of your AWS, GCP, or Azure blobs or buckets, right? So it's very important that it's stored in a storage that is owned by you and not by Netskope. We will not store any of your packets. And what we store is the encrypted packets, right? Not the decrypted. But we also have the session key that the proxy has to decrypt the traffic. Now, what we do is we provide a tool that runs in your VPC that takes that encrypted packet together with the session key and gives you a decrypted stream, just like what you had on-prem. So we have completely recreated this in a very secure manner, which is completely under your control. And now you can take the decrypted stream and run your third-party tools. Like we have integrations with NDR vendors and any other tools that you would have run on-prem. You can run it using this Cloud Tap. So this is, from what we know, is one of a kind. We are pioneers in the market, and we're very excited because we're getting good feedback from our early early customers who have adopted that. Now, what are the use cases we are seeing? So obviously threat detection is one. There's a lot of threat hunting that happens on PCAPs. So this allows you to recreate that now with the SASE platform. Performance monitoring. So this is where we have worked with some of the NDR vendors where they're able to give you a higher level of performance monitoring using the PCAPs. And then, of course, there are certain regulated verticals where you may have to store PCAPs because of compliance reasons, and in case there's a legal action and you need to produce as evidence, right? So these are some of the use cases. I'm sure there might be others, but again, we believe that by adopting the Netskope SASE platform, you should not have to compromise on or lose some of the functionality that you had on-prem, right? Now, we'll step into a demo of the Cloud Tap at this point.
I'm Thomas Smith, Principal SE at ExtraHop. We are very excited today to be partnering with Netskope, and I'll introduce you to this powerful integration and how it can unlock all the benefits of SASE while retaining the visibility of on-premises workloads. Recently, a global financial organization that I get to work with made the bold decision to move most of their critical workloads to cloud. This, of course, presented a very big challenge for cyber defense. Securing these workloads and users while moving to cloud is critical, but doing so without losing the visibility they already had on-prem with ExtraHop Reveal X was just as important to them. They presented an idea to us, a partnership between two market-leading security platforms. Netskope and ExtraHop integrated produces a world-class solution for unified security and visibility. Both market leaders in their product categories, together they could deliver the total package: security controls, visibility, and advanced threat detection for every device, everywhere. So how does it work? Netskope's Cloud Tap, connected to a RevealX packet sensor running within the customer's environment, shares packets and session keys over a secure channel. Netskope handles the unified cloud security platform, zero trust architecture, and much of the advanced threat protection, while ExtraHop delivers complete visibility and advanced threat detection, forming a perfectly complementary and complete solution. ExtraHop helps you understand everything communicating on your network and does so in real time. We auto-discover and classify assets, automatically map dependencies between critical business applications, see all the active users on the network and the devices they're logged into, and identify network risks like insecure protocols, plain text credentials, and decommissioned systems. We also help you quickly resolve security threats and performance issues by using advanced machine learning algorithms to immediately detect threats, even those hiding within encrypted traffic. We identify the root cause of performance issues, integrate with key technologies to automatically take remediation action, and access to the full packets that we collect preserve evidence for forensics. Network data is immutable. Adversaries can't erase it or tamper with it. Modern attacks hide their tracks, operating within your networks and moving laterally, living off the land by using trusted, encrypted connections between enterprise assets, exploiting weaknesses in common protocols, and establishing persistence. While all of these methods, tactics, techniques, and procedures can be difficult to detect by traditional security tools, the truth is on the wire, which is to say the information extracted from packets and flows in motion contain the truth. Since Netskope's Cloud Tap shares the session keys with RevealX, we are able to perform out-of-band decryption and extract over 30,000 unique metrics in real time. We build very detailed record logs of every flow and then apply cloud-scale machine learning to detect advanced threats within that traffic. Here we have an example of some traffic from a Netskope gateway and the users and their devices coming through it. ExtraHop RevealX automatically builds a profile for these assets that contains their peer connections, various protocol activity, and detailed metadata about their software, aliases, users, and more. We see every cloud service access and every geographical source or destination. Large uploads, which could be things like data exfiltration, and other unusual behavior become obvious. We apply our advanced rules and cloud-scale machine learning to detect threats. Netskope and ExtraHop deliver some of the most advanced security capabilities on the market today. Combining them is a moonshot that delivers unified security controls on a zero-trust architecture with complete visibility, on-prem, in the cloud, and at home. Thank you.
Now let's go on to the C2 beacon detection. So what are beacons, right? Beacons are nothing but callback homes, right? Like for example, you can take, for example, the NS client that runs on the on your endpoints, right? It constantly calls back home to say, hey, is there any new updates for me, new configuration updates or new software updates? So those are beacons, right? Similarly, there are so many agents. Even think of your laptop that has Microsoft software or Apple software. They're constantly calling back home to see, is there a new update available? So those are beacons, right? Now, so beacons are very common in the industry. Anybody doing software development would be familiar with beacons. Now, why do we call out beacons? Because there's benign beacons like what I talked about, and there are malicious beacons, right? So malware also calls back to its command and control center using beaconing, right? And why they do that is because they can evade typical security solutions by doing this beaconing infrastructure, right? Now, what we've also seen is advanced beacons which are in memory and will not even touch the disk, right? Which makes it even more difficult to detect these beacons. So the challenge here is we need to identify beacons, right, that are in the orange and the red category and not the blue ones, because we do not want false positives and block things, right? Now, I'm sure you have looked at many different security solutions like firewalls, IPSs, EDRs, secure web gateways, and whatnot, right? And this has always been a challenge, right? In terms of accurately detecting beacons, because it's like identifying the needle in the haystack. The signal to noise ratio has to be really good for you to detect these. Otherwise, it's too much noise there, right? So what we have done at Netskope, I'm very excited to share, is we have applied AI and ML. AI and ML is an excellent technology that is able to detect the benign beacons from the one that is not benign, right? And what we have done is we have trained an AI ML models with samples of benign, millions of samples of benign beacons, so it knows the type of criteria that it needs, features of these benign beacons, and able to detect the malicious and malleable beacons, right? What is clear here is not only, even EDR vendors can detect some malware beacons, but if it's in memory, that's what makes it very difficult. And so we are very excited with this technology that we have built, and we believe that this is going to further any security admin or analyst in terms of efficacy in detecting these. Okay, the last topic I want to cover today is the Cloud Risk Exchange. I talked about the Cloud Exchange. The Cloud Exchange is a platform that we have at Netskope built and made it open source. So by the way, if you go to GitHub, Netskope's open source GitHub, you will find Cloud Exchange. And the reason for open sourcing this is we believe it is an essential tool for any security analyst, right, in terms of, or admin as well, in terms of connecting various solutions in the ecosystem, right? The security ecosystem is a large one. It's not confined to one or two vendors. So Cloud Exchange is a platform that you could use to connect these various different solutions that you may have. One aspect of the Cloud Exchange is Cloud Risk Exchange, which is what I'm going to focus on today, right? What is the Cloud Risk Exchange? Cloud Risk Exchange is a way in which we can exchange risk scores from external participants, right? In this case, you have seen some of our partners like Wiz, Palo Alto, and Azure, where we can bring in like risk indicators into the Netskope platform, and the Netskope platform has that zero trust policy framework where you could use that to enforce policies, right? Now, we have done a bunch of different risk integrations. So one is device trust. So we work with EDR and endpoint solutions like CrowdStrike, Tanium, and so on, where we are able to get their device trust score into Netskope so that you can use that in the zero trust policy enforcement. Similarly, on the app trust side, right, if you are running your internal apps, and you have solutions like Illumio, Xylo, or Okta, and they're able to signal to Netskope your internal apps so that we can incorporate that into our private access policies so that it automates your zero trust policy enforcement for your own apps, right? So that is app trust. Similarly, instance trust. So if you have if you're collaborating with external solutions like SaaS solutions, and you want to only set policies for the instance of your partners and not open up like a box or a OneDrive or a Google Drive, the instance trust is the way you do that. And we have integrations with both CrowdStrike and Wiz, where they are able to signal the instance that is trusted by your organization that Netskope should treat differently compared to the other instances of the SaaS app where you may want to take a more restrictive action. So as you can see, there is a lot of different ways in which we are bringing in indicators of risk into the platform so that you can get much better outcomes and better real-time policy enforcement. And then finally, behavior trust, right? We have many vendors like KnowBe4, CyberArk, Mimecast, SailPoint, Okta, where they have the concept of a user risk indicator, which is brought into Netskope. We have something called user confidence index, where you can take that and normalize the score of these vendors and put it into Netskope so that we can enforce policies based on that. So I want to wrap up this session. I hope you found it interesting. I just want to give you a glimpse of looking forward. So we at Netskope, as you can see, are very committed to investing in the future. And there are certain big ticket areas for Netskope that we are emphasizing and putting resources on. The network infrastructure is a big one for us. You heard of some of the innovations we did. We will continue to invest there. We believe in the power of AI, ML, Gen AI, especially in the last 1.5 years. We have seen big advances in large language models. And so we are continuing to tap that to get better outcomes for our customers. Data protection and cloud security is, again, bread and butter for Netskope. We will continue to invest there. You will see more and more in our roadmap on where we are planning to take that. And then finally, we believe we are truly positioned as the next-gen zero trust network access solution that can be a complete replacement of your legacy VPN. And there are a lot of zero trust network access solutions, but none of them can completely replace your legacy VPN. We have a very good solution, and we are continuing to innovate there to give you that replacement where you don't have to worry about keeping multiple solutions in place. So with that, I'm going to wrap this. I hope you found this useful, and we'll continue to follow Netskope to hear more about the innovations in the future. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Udayan Palekaras, and I lead Netskope's global product management teams driving threat protection, including threat research, behavior analytics or UEBA, and the secure web gateway product lines. The Netskope research team regularly investigates the threat landscape to identify trends based on millions of anonymized user activities in the Netskope cloud. Today, we look at some of these top trends, their implications, and what to do next as you look to manage and mitigate these risks. The threat landscape in 2024 looks very different than what we saw in 2023. Gen AI app usage has gone mainstream, and virtually all organizations now use Gen AI applications, with usage increasing from 74% last year to 96% of organizations using Gen AI applications. Gen AI adoption itself, while rapidly growing, has yet to reach steady state. So we are already seeing new attack vectors and risk emerging. Cloud SaaS adoption continues to grow in enterprise environments, with users constantly adopting new applications and increasing the usage of existing apps. As you know, Microsoft and Google apps continue to dominate these across industries and geos, as apps from these vendors are becoming even more ingrained in critical business processes. Adversaries are recognizing this trend and abusing and targeting popular cloud applications in their operations more frequently. More enterprises block malicious URLs, and bad actors attempt to bypass these controls by using popular cloud apps instead in order to stay under the radar. The third large trend that we are seeing is around social engineering. It's becoming the most common method for adversaries to gain access into victims' environments. Adversaries are being increasingly successful in tricking victims into downloading Trojans by hosting them in popular SaaS applications, and in tricking victims into clicking on phishing baits designed to steal SaaS app credentials. So on average, we see about 29 in an enterprise of about 10K enterprise users clicking on phishing links every month. So if you think about that, in a 10K enterprise, that's about 350 users being successfully phished every year. The rapid rise of Gen AI apps has taken off in nearly all organizations. So about a year ago, 75% of organizations were actively using Gen AI. We're also seeing now a vast majority of organizations using Gen AI, but also with rapid product evolution, because the product release activity is very high, indicating that we are still early in the AI innovation cycle, with heavy R&D investment happening across the industry. As an example, there have been 24 feature releases, both minor and major, of ChatGPT just in the last year, or approximately 2 per month. Not only are more organizations using Gen AI, the number of Gen AI apps being used in an organization is rapidly increasing. While on average, the number of apps used in an organization increased from 4 to 6, there's more significant growth when you look at the extremes. In the top 25% of organizations, Gen AI usage actually increased 4x, from 6 to 24 apps. While in the top 1%, it increased 6x to 80 apps. In the top 25% of organizations, Gen AI usage increased 4x, from 6 to 24 apps, while in the top 1%, it increased 6x to 80 apps. When you look at users, there's also a sharp increase in the number of users interacting with Gen AI apps. While the overall percentage of users using GenAI apps is still relatively low, the rate of increase is what is significant. The average number of users per month using GenAI has tripled, while at the extremes, the percentage of users using GenAI has grown to 15% of users. We continue to see growth in GenAI adoption and will continue over the next year, as we've not seen any signs of flattening growth rates. The implications for you and security analysts everywhere is that the number of GenAI offerings continues to grow, and it presents a moving target when you look at risk controls. There are some very compelling real-world use cases driving this adoption, including coding help, writing assistance, creating presentations, and the video and imaging generation. Netskope research is tracking more than 200 different GenAI apps in use today. ChatGPT, of course, continues to be the most popular, with 80% of organizations using it, while Microsoft Copilot, which became generally available earlier this year, is third with 57% of organizations using that application. Grammarly and Google Gemini, which is formerly known as Bard, round out that top four. When you look at growth of adoption, most steady increases for all applications with the exception of Microsoft Copilot. Microsoft Copilot has grown tremendously, with usage increasing to 57% of all organizations in the last 6 months since release. This shows in part the high adoption rate of Microsoft Enterprise install base and their appetite for new Microsoft offerings. Some newcomers in this space include popular applications like Beautiful AI for presentations, WriteSonic for writing, Tactic for business meeting transcription, Zoom, Meet, etc., and GitHub Copilot for coding. All of these new trends drive new attack vectors and scenarios. So while these changes are happening, data still remains the most critical asset to protect when Gen AI apps are in use. And users are obviously the key actors causing and preventing data risk. You can look at risk along two dimensions. What data do my users send into Gen AI apps? And what data do these users receive and consume from Gen AI services? Today, the focus for most organizations is on the former, the data risk associated with users submitting prompts to Gen AI apps, as opposed to risk of using data coming or appearing to come from Gen AI services. So today's focus is on the left-hand side, unknown or suspicious apps, how to prevent data leakage, PII, trade secret credentials, etc. This prioritization makes sense for most organizations. The first priority tends to be protecting an organization's information assets. And what we expect will follow is liability or correctness issues with the use of content from Gen AI apps. We're already seeing some of this, the early focus in some industries moving to detection of Gen AI for detecting copyright violations, social engineering, phishing, deepfakes, etc. And what we can expect going forward is Gen AI usage will get even more sophisticated in brand reputation attacks, hallucinations, misinformation, blackmail, as well as extortion scams. Some of these emerging threats in Gen AI apps mirror what we've been seeing in cloud apps for a while. As we've been reporting, more malware now comes from most popular cloud applications. Typical URL filtering is no longer effective, as most organizations are likely to allow access to popular apps. Personal instances of these allowed applications become popular targets, and users are more likely to download Trojans from these familiar apps. Microsoft OneDrive is ubiquitous in the enterprise. It's the most popular SaaS app by a large margin, with nearly 2/3 of all enterprise users accessing content from OneDrive every month. So it's not surprising that you also see it leading in terms of malware downloads. Adversaries can easily create their own OneDrive accounts to host malware, which they then share with their victims. Furthermore, because 2/3 of users regularly use OneDrive, they are accustomed to clicking on OneDrive links and therefore more susceptible to do so when an adversary shares a link. SharePoint has been trending higher on this chart compared to last year due to an increase in Trojans being shared with victims over Microsoft Teams. These files are stored as Microsoft SharePoint downloads and shown on the Netskope platform. None of this is actually surprising. Abusing cloud apps for malware delivery enables attackers to evade security controls. So if you're relying primarily on domain block lists and URL filtering, or not decrypting and inspecting cloud application traffic, that makes you especially vulnerable. At the same time, the number of cloud apps being used for malware downloads is increasing rapidly. But as we saw in the previous slide, adversaries are having the most success with the most popular apps. The third macro trend we talked about is the continuing increase and evolution of social engineering attacks. Common attacks today include disguised links to reputable applications, trusted search engine result poisoning, to elevate the rankings of malicious websites, to trick users to visit these seemingly trusted websites. We're also seeing occurrences of deepfakes via phone calls and even video calls. There's the famous recent case of a finance worker joining a multi-person video call where every person he saw, including the CFO, was fake, and that worker was tricked into paying $25 million to the fraudsters. Social engineering attack trends span across different categories, the most popular being OneDrive, SharePoint, and Microsoft Teams, the downloads for phishing malware, as well as Microsoft app credentials, which are a lucrative target for attackers. Employees are accustomed to trusting Microsoft app links, clicking on them throughout their working day. When you look at top phishing categories, shopping tends to be one of the top targets. So the shopping giants like Amazon and eBay remain top targets, as well as gaming platforms like Steam, which was the most targeted gaming platform by a large margin. Adversaries typically use the payment information attached to the account to make purchases and also try to use the account to compromise additional accounts. The most common government target was the IRS, where attackers created phishing pages to steal financial data from their victims. When we look at adversary motivations and tactics, Netskope researchers examine criminal versus geopolitical motivations. So you can think of criminal tactics such as ransomware, deploying an info stealer, sabotaging systems with vipers, etc. Whereas with geopolitical, it's cyber espionage, spreading misinformation, trying to influence elections. And as you can see, the motivations vary depending on the target region. You can see, for example, in North America, criminal activity is higher, whereas in Asia, it's roughly balanced between criminal versus geopolitical. When you look at the top active adversary groups, most of the top groups are attributed to Russia and have criminal intent as their motivation. Some of these have been in the news recently as well, so some of them will look familiar. China APT41 or Wicked Panda rounds out the list as one of the state-sponsored groups that have commonly used social media as C2 channels. So managing risk. How do we manage risk and what do we do next? Managing Gen AI risk for most companies involves blocking Gen AI apps. So the number of companies blocking Gen AI that have put outright blocking policies in place has gone up dramatically. It used to be 54% last year. Now it's much higher at 77%. They're also blocking more Gen AI apps, which makes sense as new apps become rapidly available, and until they are evaluated, security teams put in place a blocking policy. The top 10 blocked Gen AI apps include newcomers such as Beautiful AI, which is the most blocked app. We also see policies maturing, where rather than putting an outright blocking policy for a particular app, only specific activities for that app are disallowed by policy. Organizations are also looking to control specific data flows, especially to block Gen AI prompts containing sensitive information or confidential information. When you look at Gen AI apps and the types of data uploaded to these apps that involve DLP violations, nearly half of this was determined to be source code accounts. Whereas with regulated data, industry regulations or compliance tended to be around 35% and intellectual property at 15%. We also see continued use of real-time coaching to control AI app access. Coaching controls can be a very effective technique to deal with gray areas, especially in early, fast-moving technology cycles like Gen AI. User behavior anomaly detection can be used to detect suspicious flows. So, for example, when you look at top applications from which sensitive data was sent to Gen AI apps, it reflects the popularity of corporate cloud apps. Detecting suspicious data movement to an approved Gen AI app is critical. So think about user response to coaching alerts and how they can be used to inform security policy. Applications that a majority of users have decided not to use based on a coaching dialog message can be analyzed for an outright block list. If the user decided to proceed, you can evaluate whether that app should be allowed and added to the corporate standards list, or perhaps it needs to be blocked outright if there's an alternate acceptable app. In terms of malware protection, the recommended policies span doing the basics to inspecting all cloud app content for known as well as targeted threats, monitoring user behavior and using anomalous detection such as C2 callbacks to inform and build proactive threat hunting hypotheses. In this area, the key is to be able to get sophisticated detections that can automatically correlate multiple different alerts and narrow it down to a detection scenario like a compromised credential or a compromised insider. And then you can go ahead and investigate that scenario. This helps reduce the time you spend in investigating one-dimensional simple rules like bulk upload or bulk download, and reduces the time to correlate hundreds of such alerts. When you look at phishing protection, the basics involve, of course, user training, MFA, email protection, but also blocking non-email phishing from cloud apps. We're also seeing an increase in the use of email attachments with embedded phishing links to evade blocking of phishing links directly in the email body. Risk scoring for users and subjecting risky users to MFA or training based on their riskiness score can provide protections from compromised accounts. Real-time threat protection at time zero is the real frontline. Today, attack cycles have become faster, and targeted attacks from trusted apps mean you no longer have the luxury of waiting for a few hours when the threat feeds updates occur and the intel becomes widely available. So examine both the real-time efficacy as well as the exposure time till the first detection, as well as false positive rates in all the test reports that vendors provide you or publish, as well as in your own tests. When you look at a solution, a multi-vendor defense in-depth ecosystem is something that enables your threat teams to hunt impacts. So look for solutions that allow easy integration for third-party vendor tools in the ecosystem leveraging simple APIs. Netskope provides a robust ecosystem of more than 70 ready-to-use plugins that allow API-based workflows for detection, intel sharing, and remediation actions. Netskope is also enabling well-understood solutions such as packet capture and replay, NDR tools for compliance and threat hunting in the cloud. Netskope is the first and only vendor to be able to provide this cloud-tapped solution, which will be widely available later this year. A lot of the information we've shared here is readily available and updated in Netskope Threat Labs publications, including blogs, research reports, and industry press publications where Netskope research is featured. Lastly, you can understand more about threats by referencing Netskope Threat Research Library, where threats discovered and analyzed by Netskope Cloud are available, as well as you can search related blogs and IOCs attached to those threats. Of course, the best context is directly available in the Netskope tenant, but here is another way to stay knowledgeable about the threat landscape that we are operating in. With that, I appreciate you joining us today and spending your time with us.
Wow. So for me, that kind of defined comprehensive. What a fantastic overview. So much education going on, learning a ton about what Netskope is doing and what they offer. Such great innovation going on. So I want to thank Netskope for being here today. An amazing incredible time there. So before we let you go, folks, we have one more piece of business to take care of, and that is the Amazon gift card prize drawing. And the winner of the $250 gift card for this event is Andrew Hendricks from California. So congratulations to you, Andrew. Sit tight and we will be in touch to get you your card. And with that, folks, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank Netskope for making this event possible. I want to thank all of you attendees for being here, for your interest in this topic, for your fantastic attention today. It was a long session, but just great stuff in there. So thank you for hanging out with me this afternoon, or whatever time it is, wherever you are. Can't wait to see you in the next event, everyone. That wraps us for right now, folks. Have a great rest of your day.